It's 5 o'clock and you're on Otago Access Radio. Tēnā koe. Hello and welcome to a new and special series called Rattling the Chains. I'm your host Ian Telfer, and for the next 6 weeks we're going deep inside Dunedin's upcoming mayoral election. Now, I know the election's about much more than who we choose for our mayor. There's also the council and the health board and the regional council, but you can't do it all. So here at OAR, we figured the thing we can do is to find out live and in depth about all the mayoral contenders. So we're hoping to get them all in before the postal voting starts in late September. But tonight we thought we'd start by looking back, and who better to reflect with us on all that's happened recently and where we are right now than the current and outgoing mayor, Dave Cull. Dave should need little introduction to people of Dunedin. Three-term mayor, before that councillor, TV presenter, author and landscaper. But what we're really interested in tonight is his 3 terms as the mayor of Dunedin, his high times and his low times. And he's with me here in the studio now. So tēnā koe, Dave.
Kia ora, Ian.
Dave, was it a hard decision not to run again?
Yeah, it was in a way. On the one hand, I'm still really enjoying the job. I'm still getting an enormous amount of satisfaction out of it. On the other, there are other priorities in life, my family, my mokopuna, and in the end, they won.
But 3 terms, how do you decide not 4? When do you know when it's the right time to go?
Well, to some extent, it was around my age. I'm 70 next year. And my family were saying to me at that age, do you want to be missing out on some of I've got some very young grandkids. Do you want to be missing out on that? Because inevitably I will. And I want to go out when I'm still really energised and still enjoying it. I don't want to go out on a low ebb at the end of my energy. So,
John Key did similarly, didn't he? He did 8 years. It seems about a natural cycle, does it?
I guess. If the electoral term were longer, it might be 12, because I actually think the electoral term's far too short. And if I did 3 terms of 4 years, it'd be quite a lot more.
It would have been 12 at least. Tim Shadbolt doesn't seem to be stopped by this. He's had 30 years or something, hasn't he?
No, he's not stopped by much. That's
true. Yeah. What's the job of mayor these days? 21st century? Is it like the US president, commander in chief? The things that come to the desk are the things that are the problem things that no one else can solve, or is it something else?
No, you've got to be as mayor. You can't afford to be a single or even 2 or 3 issue leader. You've got to be over most things, not necessarily in huge depth, but you've got to be concerned with it. You're just as concerned about running a good citizenship ceremony as going into a workshop on waste options next month. There's an enormous amount. It's relations with our sister cities, for instance, and relations with the Strathtyre Community Board. So it's very varied, and I guess you've got to recognise that it's not just about doing bits and pieces and making decisions. It's also about representing your city. Really, you're the person that if people think about Dunedin and how it's placed in something economic development or relations with another city. You're the point man,
right,
or woman.
People want to see you up front, don't they? And they in sense, in Wellington or anywhere else, they see you, the mayor, as a representative.
They're very much so. Yeah. And you've got a responsibility to do that well.
At the same time, you need to keep on track the council and lead the team. You also need to be at every local school opening and all the things. I mean, there's a lot of it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a lot of that, and none of them are unimportant. But I've certainly in the last couple of years, when I've also held the position of Local Government New Zealand President, I've relied on other councillors to step into various roles for me, and they've been really great. In fact, before I put my name forward for the presidency of Local Government New Zealand, I asked my councillors, especially the senior ones, whether they would be prepared to support me in that regard, because if they and my chief executive, because if they hadn't been, I wouldn't have done it.
Because you knew you wouldn't be on the ground so much.
Absolutely.
Has that been difficult, though? Has it meant that you've felt a bit out of touch at times?
No, I'm never felt out of touch. It has been occasionally difficult where I've had to say, should I be meeting a minister in Wellington or should I be at the Otago Mayoral Forum, both of which are really important events.
Right.
So to that extent, it's
there's some trade-offs.
But you're never out of touch.
But mayor's a full-time job, isn't it? I saw you once, I think in an airport or something, looking a bit ragged, and I said, gosh, you work hard. And you said, I don't work hard, I work long.
Yeah.
Is that right?
There are long hours. If you're going to get everything done, if you're going to get all the reading done.
How long? Because we're going to be getting in the future contenders. What are they up for?
I get up at 5 every weekday. And I'm usually at my desk at home by 6, either prepping a speech or clearing emails or looking at a report or something. And I'm normally not home before 7. But it's also there's also commitments on the weekends because some things only happen on weekends. It might be a Saturday morning radio slot occasionally, or it might be opening something in the middle of the day, or a sports event, kids soccer or
Dave, that's a heavy workload. I mean, 12 hours a day plus weekends, that's 60, 70 hours a week, right?
Yeah, it is, but I make sure from time to time that I just take a weekend out and I head up Central, and
is that a reasonable load though for a public servant in a sense? I know you're a community leader, but 70 hours a week, who can keep that up? You did clearly.
Yeah, I think you've got to pace yourself, psychologically.
Did you want to be mayor when you were? Boris Johnson famously said he wanted to be world king when he was 12 or something. Yeah, when you were 12, would you say? Well, that's right. He had to settle for Prime Minister. But did you have aspirations when you were young?
No, not at all. Even after I got onto council, I didn't. I remember talking to.
That's just what you say, though, isn't it? I don't want to be mayor.
No, I didn't ever. I remember someone saying to me. Not long after I got onto council in 2007 or 2008, it may have been, someone said, you could go for the mayoralty. And I said, look, there's enough old hens and roosters scrambling to the top of that particular dung heap without me getting in there as well. And a year and a half later, I was mayor.
What changed?
I think the 2010 election came up, and it was clear there was the whole stadium debate was raging. It was clear there was a considerable amount of dissatisfaction with the council's attitude to the community's views, and I was going to be standing again for council, and if you recall, I was in a group, we called ourselves Greater Dunedin. We already had 3 councillors on from 2007. We pulled together a bigger team and subsequently got 2 more on in 2010. And as we sat around saying, well, we're putting a whole team together.
Which one of you is going to be mayor?
Well, it's pretty much, we came to the conclusion that we needed a mayoral candidate, and I thought that more than one hand would go up, but it didn't. That was me.
And the rest is history. Were you surprised when you won? Or by then did you know?
I was... When I went into it, I thought I might have had a chance, but as the campaign progressed, I became a little more confident. But I certainly would never count my chickens until they're there.
But you must have recognised that there was a mood on for change, and particularly anti-stadium mood, right?
Yes, there was. Yeah, and
you were that candidate.
I was that candidate. And it wasn't that I was, just to be clear, it wasn't that I was anti-stadium. I was anti the financial model that was being put forward to
right. You believed that it was too much Rolls-Royce. I
didn't believe that the way we were being told it would be paid for was possible, and it turned out I was right.
Were you right?
I was. It was
even though now we built a Rolls-Royce stadium, which everyone else wants to copy.
Oh, look, the context there was that the proponents of the stadium said it would be to some extent a game changer for Dunedin. It would bring events here, etc. and here's how we're going to pay for it. The council-owned companies are about to put all these dividends into it, etc. And I said, everyone would like a new stadium, like everyone would like a Porsche, but that model won't work. It'll put our companies at considerable risk. Turns out we were both right. It did turn out to be a wonderful asset for the city, and I was right that we nearly lost the council companies as a result of it, and we're still working through that, that financial mess.
And that issue really has been one of the big ones of your mayoralty, hasn't it? Because the first 3 years in particular were really austere, weren't they?
Oh, they were. Only 4 or so months after I became mayor, the board of DCHL, council-owned holding company, came to me and said, everyone said that we could keep producing $23 million a year in dividends to pay for the stadium. And I said, yes. And they said, well, we can't. And I asked how much they could pay, and I couldn't get a straight answer, or I got different answers. And in the end, you might recall, we did an inquiry, and we disestablished that board. We fired the board.
And in fact, big change, wasn't there, around
the
companies?
Well, it's a huge change, and we're still not getting dividends from the companies. Now, that's not... The companies are rebuilding, and they're actually doing really, really well.
Is that because of the stadium?
Yes, because they'd already borrowed money to pay dividends to council, and they could, the claim prior to the stadium being built that those huge dividends could be sustained was clearly either dishonest or ignorant, and the board should have known and didn't let on. So,
in retrospect, was it the right decision though to build it, or do you wish we hadn't?
Oh, look, I don't even think about it now because once it was being built, my attitude was you make the most of it, and you make it work, because the alternative was to make we've been cutting off our nose to spite our face. Sure.
We've already paid for it.
We've already paid for it.
Now we're not going to use it.
But we better damn well make it work.
I understand.
And but it wasn't easy, and it took some years before it did get to work. And it wasn't until our current CEO Terry Davies came along, and he got it. He understood how to make it work. It wasn't until then that we started.
And now it does seem to be humming.
It does, but it still doesn't. For instance, it brings a lot of benefit to the city, but it doesn't make a profit in the sense that the proponents claimed it would. It certainly doesn't make enough profit to service all its debt, for instance. But that's not the only criteria for success, and the fact that it brings a considerable economic benefit to the city is a very good thing.
Make the most of it. Another one that turned up in your mayoralty was this idea of a 5-star hotel.
Yep. We
still haven't built that, though.
No. And what it shows is how difficult it is to get a particularly 5-star hotel off the ground, and that's not just because of planning problems. It's very difficult to make them stack up economically, financially.
Because we're not a big city, because we're...
and our, the rate you can charge for a 5-star room here is nothing compared with what you can charge for a 5-star room in a much bigger city. The economics
and does that mean that then it has to
be
be bigger? Because we had the first proposal, of course, was Wharf Street, wasn't it?
Yep.
Which was 28 stories and a glass facade.
Yep.
And it seemed like it was all go. And then it kind of got into some public opposition and into the legal process, and it just all fell over.
Yes, no, what eventually confirmed that wouldn't work was around planning, and that was around
a very constrained site, wasn't it?
Yeah, you couldn't make
very narrow,
you
very
couldn't
small.
make the transport work.
Right.
It just couldn't be made to work.
And we've had another shot at it. There's been the one that was going to be up behind the town hall, which was dubbed the Electric Thistle. Mm-hmm. That's not seemed to be moving either. Or are you still holding your hope?
It's still. Well, there's a number of things going on. That in particular, Mr. Toswell is still engaged, but barely a month goes by without some approach or conversation about a possible hotel, whether it's
it's still live.
Well, it's either there or down on the waterfront. It will happen, but it will take a particular set of circumstances to get it right, and we just haven't quite latched onto it.
It's been disappointing.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. I've said all along that we have needed more hotel space in the city, and we've needed higher quality hotel space in the city. Now, there's been some really good developments. There's been there actually have been quite a few beds built in the city in the hotels. The Distinction is a very good example, very good hotel. There are other, Victoria, I think, around the corner. It's got a whole new block. There's a couple of boutique hotels.
In between, a lot of 4.5 star and all that sort of thing have popped up, haven't they?
And they're all pretty good.
They're filling the gap, in a sense.
Yep.
So do we need a 5-star now?
Well, I think it would be good if we did. We don't have a full 5-star, international quality 5-star hotel yet.
The Hyatt or the Hilton or something.
Yeah, and I think it would probably be good for the city, but as I say, the stars need to align.
That's in the in-tray for the next mayor.
Looks like it.
You're on OAR FM. It's 5:16, but after that, and you're with Rattling the Chains. I'm Ian Telfer, your host this afternoon on this mayoral election program that we're doing, and with me is the outgoing mayor, Dave Cull. Dave, some of the other big ones, you ran straight into quite a few speed bumps in the last 9 years, eh? There was the jobs issues around Hillside closing, then Cadbury's. There was oil drilling and the difficulty of making decisions about whether we would find gas off the coast and what it would mean. And then there was climate change. There was floods. And then there was this whole issue of South Dunedin.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back on all of those different things, what was the hardest thing?
I think...
or was it something else?
No, I think one of the things that has really disappointed and irritated me was the reaction to the 2015 floods in South Dunedin. Whilst there's absolutely no doubt that a failure of pump infrastructure exacerbated the flood, the fact is that with that amount of rain falling in that amount of time, there was going to be a flood. It had nothing to do, the cause of it was not failed council infrastructure. And it's disappointed me that so many people so vigorously... No, it was people were still denying climate change, and they would clutch at any straw and make any accusation in order to avoid fronting up to the fact that we've got climate change effects in our own city. And that was even after the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment had said South Dunedin is the most at risk, or the biggest extent of housing at risk in this country from climate change effects. So it's disappointed me that misinformation was pumped out by people who should have known a hell of a lot better. And it's taken a lot to move to a more constructive conversation about how we deal with it, and we're doing that now, and it's working. That part of it's working really well. But I still hear people every now and again hark back to, if the mud tanks hadn't been, wouldn't have happened. It's just not true, and it never was true.
It was a tricky time, wasn't it? The council had to eventually acknowledge that it made the thing worse, the mud tank cleaning. So I think 20 centimetres.
The mud tanks didn't make it worse. No. It was the failed pump.
Oh, I see, the failed pump.
That made it quite
and
the
screens
worse.
and the infrastructure made the flood worse. I think by 20 centimetres from memory.
Yep.
But as you say, we got 2 or 3 months worth of rain in a day.
Yep.
Right. But it seemed that then, when you were commenting on it after a week or so, after you started to raise the issue of managed retreat, and it went crazy, right? People really took it personally.
Oh, yeah.
And do you regret that now?
No, I don't. I think the idea that if a word really frightens you, you just stop saying it is loony. And we were told at various times that we were simply not allowed, by people who, senior positions, you should not use the word retreat. It upsets people. Well, sorry, that was the reality. And it still is the reality. And we only have to look around the rest of the country, interestingly enough, and people are having to retreat from coastal erosion and rising sea levels all around New Zealand at the moment. And far worse is to come. So I don't regret it. It had to be. It was going to have to come up sooner or later.
You wanted to start the conversation.
Yeah, we had to.
Yeah. But it's a hard one to have, isn't it?
It's a hard one to have,
and people
but it's more expensive not to.
Yes, but people in South Dunedin understandably, first and foremost wanted their community to stay together, right? And the idea that they would have to shift out was anathema.
Yep, and that's the same for any community.
So what are you asking of them?
I think what we've learned is that we need to have an in-depth conversation, two-way conversation about what they want, what they're prepared to pitch in with, and how we can manage the whole thing. Because although we know that there will be parts of South Dunedin in the future that will be retreated from, it probably won't be all of it. And there may be all sorts of new technologies come along in the meantime. But the naive view that you can just put in bigger pumps, as has been suggested in some quarters, is just loony. The water's coming up under the ground, let alone coming down from the sky. But all around the country, councils, in fact the whole local government sector, is saying to government, we know we're in the middle of this, but we need a framework to have the discussion within. We need to know a little more clearly about what our liabilities are, what our risks are as councils, and how we can divvy up the responsibility. Because we can't do it on our own, but neither can the homeowner do it on their own or the central government.
And we're seeing people, the government is starting now, isn't it, to get into that conversation?
Well, it's starting to.
But it's
taken a very long time. Right. And there's been some unfortunate things happen. For instance, a few years ago in Kapiti, the council put a line on that, worked out where sea level rise was likely to impinge on people's properties, and they put a line on the land information memoranda for all those properties to say below here is at risk. Right. Unfortunately, or fortunately, many of those properties were owned by pretty well-heeled people. They took the council to court, and on a process basis, they got it overturned. Right. Now, the council's doing the right thing, but clearly these people felt the council was liable for diminishing the value of their properties.
It just shows, doesn't it, how hard this fight's going to be, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. And so what we're saying, what local government is saying to central government is put a regime in place that protects us to do the right thing.
Right, to back it. That was the low point. What was the high point? What was the best thing that happened in the last 9 years? Do you know? Is there any time you actually came out and said, I cracked it, we did it?
Oh, look, there's been a whole lot of things. I think the high point is not any one point. The best thing we did as a city was gradually work up our strategic framework. Now, it all sounds a bit dry, but the fact is, when I was going for the Mayoralty, I said, one of the things I said was, what we need to do is look ahead 20, 30 years and ask the question, what do we want our city to be like? And we work back from there, and not just me, but the city, the community, and we looked at that in terms of economic development, in terms of environment, in terms of arts and culture or whatever, and we developed a set of strategies. Now, they've been developed with the community, and that's given us a much clearer idea of what we want our city to be like.
So there's a bit of a blueprint.
A bit of a blueprint, but people have really got on board with it. And I think that gives us a context to make spending decisions within. Because if a report comes to council, and really sort of broad terms, if a report comes to council and says, well, there's an option of spending $500,000 on this or whatever, you say, well, to what extent does this meet the needs of our vision? And if it doesn't, then you can say, well, are we changing our mind, or why would we do this? And so I think that's been a really good thing.
Do you think that's something that will carry the council forward too?
It's the strategy until the council changes it, those strategies.
But it also gives someone coming in...
It's something to stand on.
To build on.
And I think the other good thing about it was that we did it with the community. For instance, the two examples of that would be, with the environment strategy, we went to Ngāi Tahu and said, you're the people of the land. You're the ones that have the oldest interest in this. Can you partner with us and do it? And it was a great process. We developed it with Ngāi Tahu. Then we were approached by the arts community in the city, and they said, you haven't got an arts strategy. And we said, oh, no, we haven't. And they said, well, we need one. Let's partner and do it. And they almost led. And that was a great relationship. And I mean, there was some arm wrestling occasionally about it, but it was the community actually led it, and they provided a good deal of the vision for it. So that was great.
There you go.
Was
it all worth it, Dave? 70-hour weeks, 10 hours, 10 weeks, years of your life?
I've had learned an enormous amount and gained an enormous amount of satisfaction and made a lot of really good friends. It's definitely been worth it. Highlight of my life, I'd say.
You think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. What are you going to do next?
I'm going to stand for the SDHB.
Are you? The health board? Really? Not quite out of public life yet?
No. I think I've learned an enormous amount in the last 9 years, and I think it'd be a shame not to put that experience and learning to use. I think we're at a critical time in the health industry. Apart from all the issues that keep coming up, we've got wonderful opportunities in front of us. We're getting a new hospital,
true.
But that has to be the whole model of care needs to be adjusted to optimise the use of that hospital. There has to be much more emphasis on preventative and primary care. So I think this is a good time to be contributing.
Not an easy thing to step into, though. They've just had a commissioner trying to sort them out, and there's still $40 million in the deficit.
I think that's the low number.
Good luck. All right. Well, I think that time has rattled past. But thank you, Dave, for coming in.
Pleasure.
And for all your honesty and openness. And thank you, I think, on behalf of the city for your, if nothing else, dedicated and tireless service.
Thank you.
For us. It's a somewhat thankless job, I think, at times. But
sometimes, but you develop a thick skin, and if when allegations or criticisms are made, you look at the facts and then you look at the person, and if neither of them stack up, you discount them.
Dave Cull. Well, if you want to hear this program again or share it with your friends, you can listen out for repeats. You can download the podcast at oar.org.nz. And if you want to see us, you can, because we've made a video of this thing, and there's going to be a video up tomorrow on YouTube and Facebook. And if you're exceedingly keen to get in on this program, you could even join by running for mayor yourself. Time has not run out, so you have until Friday to nominate to run for mayor, or indeed for council, or the health board, and you can run against Dave Cull. There's already 9 mayoral candidates officially, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be at least a couple more. So if you want to have a crack now that Dave's left the field, then this is your big chance. Now, what we're doing here in Rattling the Chains is we're going to try and get every contender that's standing for the mayoralty over into the program over the next 5 weeks, and we'll have to do that in pairs, or we'll probably do it in some triple billings. So tune in every Monday for the next 5 weeks at 5 p.m. for a live debate of the issues. Next week we'll be rattling the chains with our first 2 contenders, and they will be Councillor Jim the Chocolate Man O'Malley and the businesswoman and former journalist Carmen Houlihan. Thank you to my excellent production team, Leslie, Jeff and Dom. And for now, thanks to you for listening, and have a very good evening.